Maybe we can first start with how it was like spending the day with him. You had a ton of details in your story, rich nuggets, like when you checked out with him and he was employee number 1. That was what his ID number said. If I was the employee he was talking to, I would have just been scared. But can you tell us more about how that process was like and what it was like getting to know him?
Yeah, in fact, I was a little worried about even putting that number out there because, I don't know how the system works, but somebody could use it and actually get the discount. So it's not my fault if that happens. But yeah, going to the store with him was just really, really fascinating. I mean, he, came up with the concept, and he is the sort of the gravitational center of the company. He thinks about clothes. He thinks about retail, how to present them, how to sell them. And, that's made him a billionaire. Japan's richest person, depending on the stock price, and like the 31st wealthiest person in the world. But really just when you walk through a store with him, he's just like a store manager, right? He will touch the clothes. He'll, check out the sleeve and the hem of an item.
He's really hands-on then, Tadashi Yanai, the CEO there. Yeah.
Indeed. After, building such a large business, he still really, really enjoys going into the store, looking at the products, looking at the customers, seeing what they're doing, and just kind of staying in touch with the pulse of the consumer. And for example, he was very good friends with the store manager. He visits the store all the time. This is actually one of 2 that are located in Ginza here in Tokyo. And everything from the checkout process to, what the mood is like to the actual products, you really get a good sense of how he runs the business just through a single store visit.
Mm-hmm. Who does he consider his biggest competition? Because I know that he also has big aspirations in the retail space, doesn't he?
He does. He is looking to reach 10 trillion yen in revenue. He hasn't really given a specific time frame, but it's triple current sales. Now, look, if you sit down and ask him, who's your competition, he's not going to mention Zara, right? It's kind of obvious, but he thinks, and the people who work with him closely on the products, the styling, everything, think that Uniqlo has evolved from low quality, low cost to high quality, high style at a reasonable price. So he thinks that the clothes can be paired with a Chanel, right? And in fact, I think these days when you do kind of open up a magazine, if anyone remembers what magazines are, there are even tips on pairing Uniqlo with high-end fashion clothes. And that's kind of what they're going for, that they think that they've reached this sweet spot given their technology. You mentioned heat tech, scale, where the garments can actually serve, have a longer kind of life in your wardrobe, and paired with a lot of different clothes. That's why, you don't see logos on them. That's why you see him hiring, designers who really think hard about, what styles will sort of both be new but also endure, and all of that. Really, you just get a good sense of when you walk through the floor and you kind of listen to him talk about the business.
I didn't actually realize the enormity of Uniqlo. They have $22.9 billion in annual revenue in 26 markets. What makes them so different? You talk about the quality, but is it really just that? Do they have more of a strategy? Because you also talk about in your story how they tried to debut in the US, in New Jersey, and then they failed. So they must have done something right the second time. Tadashi Yanai, CEO of Fast Retailing, said that he wasn't... it was a challenge, but it didn't stop him. That's why he debuted the second time. Do they have a secret sauce when it comes to their strategy, other than
I think there's a few things. I think it's a willingness to fail. They have persistence. And then I think just, it sounds very basic, but just the ability to really manage a supply chain. The RFID tags that actually help with checkout were originally conceived to track distribution and inventory, actually. It was only an afterthought that they ended up being used at the cash register. But what they're actually for, and it's an added cost to each garment, is to track products as they go from the factory all the way to the store and to keep losses at a minimum. And so a lot of thought goes into the actual production and delivery of clothes. Now, the other element you spoke about, which is really how well known they are, there's still a final challenge remaining for them, which is Middle America. Uniqlo has done well on the coasts in California and in New York and, up and down the East Coast. But really, in order to kind of create a true global empire, and I've spoken with relatives in Middle America who still haven't heard about Uniqlo. And for Yanai, he sees this as a challenge. He wants to tackle this, and he thinks he's going to get there. And it's just persistence and, showing value. And just keep plugging away at it, and essentially, we'll see if he realizes that vision or not, and whether actually he can also pass the company on to people who can continue to fulfill that sort of vision that he has.